Welcome to The Writing Life, the podcast for anyone who writes. I'm Molly Rose Medhurst, the Communications Assistant from the National Centre for Writing here at Dragon Hall in Norwich UNESCO City of Literature. We're nearing the end of October now and looking forward to some brilliant winter activity here at NCW. Our next round of online tutor courses, developed in partnership with the University of East Anglia, is on sale now. Our practical and carefully supported 12 and 18-week courses are aimed at developing work in progress, honing your writing skills, and boosting your confidence. All of our courses start on Monday, 12th February. Visit nationalcentreforwriting.org.uk/academy to find out more. In this episode of The Writing Life, author Fiona Mason and former NCW CEO Chris discuss life writing. At the beginning of the City of Literature weekend, part of the Norfolk and Norwich Festival in May, Chris spoke to Fiona about the process of writing her memoir, 36 Hours. Originally from the Midlands, Fiona Mason now lives between the salt marshes of the east of England and the Ariege Pyrenees in southwest France, where she's renovating a house with her partner. She holds MAs in both philosophy and creative and life writing, and combines her work as a writer with roles as a coach, mentor, and creative writing tutor. Fiona discusses how she was compelled to write her incredibly personal memoir. She explores the stigma around talking and writing about death, how she grappled with writing such a vulnerable book, and how she makes a living from her work. So now, I'm delighted to hand over to Chris in conversation with Fiona Mason.
Welcome, Fee Mason. It's a real delight to have you on the Writing Life podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. We're recording this at the start of our City of Literature weekend as part of the Norfolk and Norwich Festival, so it feels like a really nice point to jump off into kind of a literary few days. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Well, as you'll know from the introduction, Fee is a writer, a mentor, an arts professional and an arts consultant who splits her time between the east of England salt marshes and the Ariege Pyrenees in southwest France, I read online. Is that correct?
That's right, yes. That's
Lovely.
Right.
I just want to rehearse your CV a little bit and just point out that you've got MAs in both philosophy from the excellent Essex University and creative and life writing from Goldsmiths.
Yes.
So you've been to two brilliant places, which I'm sure we'll talk about and how that's informed your writing as we go along. And we're here today to talk in part about your book 36 Hours, which in 2016 was shortlisted for the Pat Kavanagh Prize and has now finally been published as of the end of last year.
That's right, yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk to us a little bit about why you're here in Norwich as part of the City of Literature Festival, and we'll kick off from there.
Yes, we're here today obviously to record this podcast, which is brilliant, and then tomorrow, so Friday, I will be doing a panel event with writer Dr. Rupa Faruqi, and Caroline Elton, and we'll just be talking about writing medical memoir, I guess we might call it, life writing and the issues that might arise from writing about life, death, grief, and such matters. And then Saturday morning, I'm running a creative writing workshop, which I've called Lifelines, which I'm very pleased to say is sold out. But we will be looking at, again, how you take your personal narrative and craft it into a story that's interesting for other people to read, and it's not just a blow-by-blow account of your life from year one kind of thing. So, and we'll be, exploring a few different kind of writing exercises and prompts and ideas to help people sort of think about and steer out how they might go about that process.
Brilliant. Well, we're recording this sort of in the 25th of May, I think it is today. But and while listeners won't be able to recreate your workshop, hopefully by the time this is out there in the world as a podcast, they will be able to download the soundtrack of the event that is happening. So we're going to record that, and hopefully that will be available as well. And I do recommend people do that. So 36 Hours is the book.
Yeah.
And medical memoir is a really interesting term. I think the group of people that you're working with tomorrow have got a very broad experience of both the personal and the professional worlds of medicine and how it fits in with life writing. But I think that it's also potentially a term that slightly masks the real centrality, the life centrality of the issues that you cover. Would you like to tell us a little bit about 36 Hours and how it came to be?
Yes, it was quite a sort of journey to get from where it was in my mind, I suppose, to a sort of published book. But the book covers the last 36 hours of my late husband's life. He had lung cancer and was ill for 11 months before he died, and I was his carer, cared for him, and because of the way that his disease progressed, it sort of, as any awful diagnosis like that, things became quite difficult. And but the last 36 hours in particular were really fixed in my mind. I mean, I will probably maybe go on to talk a little bit more about the format, but it felt really important to me to somehow capture the intensity of the whole experience of the period of illness and sort of distill it into that 36 hours, because that's what became really ingrained in my memory. And part of the exercise of writing was to sort of almost like get the stuff out of my head and onto the page so that I didn't have to carry it around anymore. Because I think I probably had a degree of PTSD from the experience, and it was a very sort of troubling time for a long time. It's taken me quite a lot of healing, I suppose, to sort of get through that experience. And I think that I realised early on that I can't be unique in my experience. Everybody dies, we'll all lose somebody. And I wanted to find something to read afterwards, because probably like a lot of writers and a lot of readers, we turn to literature, poetry, we look out into the world for something to help us to navigate the experience that we've had. And I couldn't find anything, it all seemed quite saccharine, lots of sort of like Disney-fied versions of, deathbed scenes and that kind of thing, and it just wasn't my experience. And,
snowy coverlets and sort of breezes drifting the curtains.
Exactly, and everybody, the vigil around the bed and the gentleness and all of that. And yes, it completely wasn't my experience. So I thought, well, if you can't find the book you want to read, you must write it. So that's what I did.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps we should start with the form, because I think that what you've done in the book, you've used a particular kind of formal structure that allows the reader both to be very much in the minutes and the hours of that last 36-hour stretch, but also to see the refraction of the whole journey of the illness through that. Tell us a little bit about how you approached that form and what you decided.
Yes, it came very spontaneously, actually. I decided to write it in first person present. I wanted to just put down the memory, I suppose, really. I mean, as I started writing it, it was literally writing down everything I could remember minute by minute, and of that last sort of period. And I wanted this hour by hour account, so that both for me as a writer going through a process of putting it down on the page, but also for the reader, I wanted to invite the reader into the intensity of that experience, into the kind of claustrophobic, kind of closed silence of the space of the house, to get a really strong sense of place. So the kind of objects and the rooms and the moving from one place to the other within the house during that time, all of these things became really important to me, and I think they're what really bring the reader into that experience. So it was spontaneous, but once I realised I was sort of going down that route, I thought, yes, this is actually the right way to go. I mean, I wrote it very, very quickly, actually. I would have blasts of sort of writing a whole chunk, and then I'd have to put it away for a bit because it was too much, But the way I wasn't sort of doing a bit every day, I would probably wake up and just be, okay, right, this is the moment, something's got to come out, and then put it away and come back to it and sort of have a bit of kind of distance from it again.
And once you'd sort of kind of externalized and captured, to what degree we can capture all of those memories and thoughts in that first person present, how did you then choose to present it to the reader?
Well, I wanted to really give them a sort of an hour by hour account. So the format of the book is every hour of that 36 hours. And it's completely my experience. So although there are other people present in the book, the story is my story. It's everything that's going on in my mind at that time. And yeah, I think that format is, certainly from the feedback I've got, and that sort of gives me a sense that the idea worked, was the wanting the reader to just be with me, to kind of for the reader to, maybe they're going through something similar, or they are, they have a loved one, a friend or colleague that has been through something similar, and maybe they'll get some insight and some understanding of what that experience is like, of caring for someone at home in the last days of life. And by having the reader, it's a kind of an idea to have someone walking alongside you, rather than kind of observing at a distance, I suppose.
Well, absolutely. I mean, as a reader, I had, at the end of last year, a very close friend, two close friends, who are a married couple. One of their fathers was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and within 7 weeks, I think, of diagnosis, he had died. And I had a very minor part in that last sort of few days. But everything about this just rang incredibly true from their experiences. So it felt like a very powerful evocation from that side of things. So I wonder if, before we come back to the writing and kind of your story, if you'd like to tell us just a little bit about Michael, as he was such obviously a powerful presence in the book and prompted this writing.
Yes, well, he was a brilliant man. He was an academic, computer scientist, and a great family man. Two wonderful kids, and he loved concrete. Before he'd gone into academia, because he went into academia quite late, he'd been a builder and a plumber and all sorts of things. And he was someone who I think just loved constructing. And I suppose there's a sort of elegance in computer science and programming and so on, that kind of, the architecture of large scale kind of operating systems and things like that in computing, map quite closely to the architecture in the built environment. And it's I could see that there was a real sort of link for him there. Because the way that his illness progressed, the lung cancer, he developed secondary tumours in his brain. And this led to some sort of personality changes. As anyone who knows someone who has gone through any kind of brain cancer, whether that's sort of primary or secondary, it can have quite profound make quite profound changes to the person. So I think that's a real sort of cruelty of it, that for some people, with an awful diagnosis, they can kind of keep going right up until the end in a way, and still feel there's still a sense that it's that person and they're present. That sort of changed, I think, for us, and that was a really difficult thing to navigate, because when you see someone who's their kind of mind and their brain and their sort of intellect is so present and so much a part of everything, it's the sort of tragedy of that is really amplified. It was for me, certainly, and I think for the family.
And certainly that's the very sort of shocking and very immediately engaging opening of the 36 hours, that trying to deal with that understanding that the person that you are caring for is both the person that you love and also not in some ways.
Yes.
Were you able to use your analytic, writerly skills at the time to help understand that, or was it only with reflection that was apparent to you?
I think with reflection, because unusually for me, during the period of the illness, I wrote very little. I wasn't keeping a diary. My memory of it is incredibly intense and vivid, and maybe in a way because I wasn't writing, perhaps that's why it's remained so vivid. I've always had a practice of journal writing, but I think I almost sort of couldn't approach doing that during the sort of period of illness. It was maybe admitting too much reality to keep putting it on the page and say, oh gosh, today's been a terrible day, or whatever. Somehow not committing it to the page. I could perhaps have some magical thinking about, we're going on as normal here, and we'll go and have a day out in the camper van, and we'll go and do the normal things of life as much as we can. And it wasn't until afterwards. Afterwards, I pretty much immediately started my journaling again.
Yeah.
But it was quite a long time before that. Years before that became something like a book. I wasn't writing a book when I was journaling. I was just trying to heal myself, I suppose.
And what prompted, do you think, that kind of the change in kind of making the decision to kind of revisit and write and then shape that experience into a book?
Well, actually, there's another sort of deeper tangent, or sort of, I don't have a deep tangent, but anyway, my mum died in 2014, January 2014, and she'd been ill with breast cancer for some years. Mum was a writer, and as is my brother, and I always felt it was something they did, that I couldn't, I wasn't a sort of a big reader in childhood, and I kind of was, I don't know, maybe I was a bit inattentive, something, I don't know, but I spent a lot of time at school staring out the window. I completely flunked everything. It's just ridiculous how badly I did. But then, obviously I came back, did my philosophy degrees and so on. And so, it's, I knew I had I wasn't stupid, I could do this thing, and I'd always written, even if I'd kept it quite secret, because I felt a bit intimidated, to be honest. And I don't think, had Mum still been around, that I would have been able to do it.
Gosh.
And it's not that she's a very encouraging person and a lovely, lovely person, but somehow, as we all have our things with our parents, that thing with that parent, for me, I think, as I reflect on it and have reflected on it over the years, it probably sort of held me back a bit. And I felt free to, I guess, find my voice as a fully fledged person, after she died. And so that was, she died in January 2014, and then that autumn I started at Goldsmiths. I applied for and got onto the MA in Creative and Life Writing, and that was a sort of, right, line in the sand.
I'm fascinated by that kind of decision. Sort of, was it something that just crept up on you, the decision to go from sort of 0 to 60 really rapidly, from not necessarily writing or considering yourself as a writer through to going on to one of the most prestigious writing MAs in the country?
I know, it sounds a bit
great.
crazy. It's great.
Wonderful.
I guess that's there is a bit of a sort of, I've got a bit of form with that, I do tend to sort of, I make a decision to do something, and then I'll kind of go, right, I'm going to really do this. But I had been writing. It's not like I hadn't. I guess I would never have said I was a writer, even though all my life I had written poetry, stories, journal, And of course, in my professional life, working within the arts and cultural sector, it's all about, well, it's certainly the way I work, it's kind of all about writing. I spend...
Telling stories,
endless funding applications. and it's an amazing training ground. Anyone out there who's wondering about, all I do is write grant applications, I really want to write a novel, but I'll never be a proper writer. Well, it's the best training ground, because the kind of editorial skills that you develop by having to, especially if you're working with someone else and they give you 12,000 words and you have to turn it into 1,000. And you can turn it into 1,000 words that are, really full of meaning and intensity and all the other things, So I think that although I didn't call myself a writer, I was a writer. I was actually earning my living out of writing, just not creative writing or whatever. So I think, therefore, it wasn't such a massive leap for me. I had things I could send to goldsmiths. I got pieces. I'd written poetry, stories, sort of reflective pieces, essays, and so on. And they obviously looked at it and thought, yes, that's okay. This person can do it, sufficiently to get something out of the programme. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, here at NCW, we work a lot with writers and translators in the early stages of their career. And it's so common, that kind of threshold between sort of understanding that one writes and calling oneself, however quietly, a writer is such a big kind of threshold, even though it might sound very minor, and psychologically it's huge.
Yes, absolutely, it is huge.
And finding other people to do it with on the other side of that threshold is possibly the biggest thing that we do in terms of supporting writers.
Yeah.
And did you find that a good experience at Goldsmiths, that kind of finding that community of writers there?
Yes, and it really took me a while to kind of find my sort of voice, I suppose, with it, because I was trying to write bits of fiction, and I was in a way trying to kind of follow the herd a little bit, and it was in the sort of second term of the first year, because I did it part-time over 2 years, so in sort of early 2015, and it was coming up to the anniversary of Michael's death, and I was just sitting in the living room and in the house that he died in, looking down the hallway, and one of my big experiences of it's almost like a PTSD experience is I would see him, completely see him, like not like a ghost, but I would see him walking, shuffling down the hallway. It was so vivid to me, and the way the light was that morning and so on. I just started writing, and I realised, this is actually why I'm doing this programme. This is what I've got to do. And I took that because, you have to have the group crit. It can be incredibly bruising, especially at MA level. It's not like your kind of local bookshop writing class, people really, really take the gloves off. And I presented something to my tutorial group. It was that term was with Francis Spufford, and it was just an amazing sort of moment of everybody read something and they were like, okay, this is it. You've got to really try and progress with this. And I got a massive amount of encouragement.
And did that feel like a kind of a professional as well as a personal catharsis or affirmation even?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So that point in doing your MA and the discovery of the sort of the excavation of why you were really there or what it was going to do for you, also it seems kind of pushed you out into the world of where literature meets medicine and meets memoir. Could you tell us a little bit about kind of that wider world and those experts that you've since come across in your research processes and in the conversations, for example, that you're going to be having tomorrow?
Yes. Well, I had a great experience. So the year after I'd more or less finished the manuscript, it took a long time from a finished manuscript. Lots of editing until it was published. But in 2017, I think it was, I attended an Arvon walking and poetry week at the Hurst, the marvellous The Hurst. Anyone who loves Shropshire in the countryside, go. It's just a brilliant place. And that was with Sacha Dugdale, poet Sacha Dugdale, and Jean Aitken. And but I met some great people on that week, and I shared some. So although it wasn't poetry, of course, we all shared some of our personal work, and did a kind of reading on the last night and that kind of thing. And one of my sort of fellow participants put me in touch with Professor Bobby Farsides at Brighton and Sussex Medical School, because she was a poet and she'd done some work with Bobby in a previous project, which looking at kind of creativity and health narratives and how you can use creative writing or art or poetry or whatever to improve communication, bridge gaps of sort of understanding. And that was a sort of massive kind of step change, I suppose, for me, because I got in touch with Bobby. Bobby read the manuscript and immediately saw the potential of it as almost as a tool to help medics, because of course there's a medical school there to help maybe young GPs or whatever, medics in training, to have a greater understanding of the kind of patient and carer experience, and to maybe that it would be really informative, it'd be almost like an educational tool, and so that relationship has continued. We've gone on to do sort of various writing projects together, that are about kind of using writing as a tool in that way. And I did a lovely project with them a couple of years ago, during lockdown, which was working with a group of parents of young people with rare genetic disorders, and working in a group setting with these parents to help them to articulate their experience, so that when they go and have their appointments with consultants or they're talking to the wider world or their family, they can better articulate that experience. And so in a way, that's taking the kind of form and the ideas and the values that are behind 36 hours and applying those in a different setting. And that's what I really, really love about it. I mean, I'm really, really passionate about that kind of work, because I think helping people to develop their own voice and develop confidence in their voice, and to somehow put on the page these incredibly difficult experiences, which it's really hard to get other people to understand.
Yeah.
And, we did all sorts of things like, just using list poems and basic forms that were a revelation to the people who were writing them. Suddenly they could understand their own experience better. Yes. And so I think I've understood, therefore, there is this real power in the kind of the medical world, not just in terms of end-of-life care, which is something I'm really passionate about, there being more kind of conversation around death and dying, but in other medical contexts as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly as a reader, kind of those absolutely piercing moments of when other professionals around you sort of, probably not in any sort of willful way, just misunderstand the emotional context, and it just makes you catch your breath as a reader. It's very well done. So, I mean, I can see how powerful this could be in those contexts. And where might you want to take this kind of particular approach?
Well, I'm now in touch with so I did an event actually with Bobby and with a medic from the Martletts Hospice in Brighton and Hove, and with a death doula. That was part of Death and Dying Week, or Dying Matters Week in 2021. And that was, again, having a big conversation about how do we talk better about death and dying, And most of the listenership for that, it was a sort of YouTube thing, that was mostly nurses, palliative care nurses and doctors. And so I was really, really pleased about that. And I think so. I feel that the audience, it's the kind of doctors, nurses, medics, people working even within administration in the NHS or whatever health service, and then it's people going through an experience themselves, whether as a carer or they've lost somebody, or perhaps even the dying person themselves who is also often absent in consideration in a very strange way. And I really want to be able to do more of that kind of, conversation. So I'm doing with a doctor in Essex who is at the St Helena Hospice. I'm doing a project with them and Colchester Arts Centre actually in the autumn. I'm going to be working with a group of carers to do a similar thing as I did with the group in Brighton and Sussex Medical School, where we'll be using the techniques of life writing to help people have a voice, I suppose, and at least to feel validated and seen in their own experience. What they do with that is will be what it will be. But I really want this book to be a vehicle for conversation, I suppose. I mean, that's ultimately why it's out in the world. It's very exposing, very personal text. It's not something I've put out lightly, I suppose.
Yes.
I really wrestled with whether I should or not. But in the end, I have felt that it can do some good in the world, and that's why it's there.
Yeah. Do you want to say a little bit about how it's felt over recent months, having this book out there and being literally being an open book in terms of this very, very intensely personal experience?
Well, it's it's been an incredible experience, really, because I guess the response to it has been. It's been everything I've hoped for it, I suppose. I've had people contact me who have read it and are going through something similar, and they say to me, I feel seen. It's thank you so much, and and it's. I haven't put it out there to get positive strokes for me, but it just tells me that there was a gap. This is needed, and. It's validating to me as a writer, because of course it's my words. Words have power. The way we put one word after another, the very precise way a writer we choose to do that. It has a purpose. Every word on the page has to earn its place on the page, in my view. That all of those years of editing grant applications down to 500 characters and so on. That's the training ground, because you can't. There's no room for sort of spare, I suppose. So, I think it's been a pretty incredible experience, and I believe it can do more. I think it's conversations like this, like the ones that we'll have over the weekend, the workshop, the workshops with the hospice. I want to do more of that with it, and I think it can. It's its own entity now. I mean, that's the thing. When you put a book out in the world, it sort of no longer belongs to you, really. You put it in the public domain. You've done your work with it, and it takes on a life of its own. And all you can do is be a sort of good custodian of it. I think that's. But I feel like it's it's out there. It's a fledgling. It's it's doing its thing.
It certainly is, and I love the cover image, which is sort of a dandelion clock with the individual sort of pieces coming off it. So it's also going out into the world like that.
That's right, and that's a drawing of mine, and there are 36 little seeds on there.
Wonderful for every hour.
Yeah,
fantastic. Good morning again, Fee. It's lovely to see you.
Great, it's good to be here.
I know we've regathered at Dragon Hall the day after yesterday's first part was recorded. Thanks to the joys of technology, we're going to add a second section to our recording today.
Fantastic.
And yesterday we'd come to a close talking, about the heart of 36 Hours and your kind of journey and experience as a writer, and what had it taken to get you there and the book there, and what your experience had been. I want to kind of make a jump from that artistic conversation to kind of more prosaic side of things. All writers have to exist in the world, and they've got to pay bills and live, and as well as kind of create. So can you tell us a little bit about how you managed to balance that aspect of your writing career and where you found support?
Yes, I've been able to carry on with the day job, which is working in the arts and cultural sector, so doing a lot of fundraising and that kind of thing. But I was also fortunate in 2018 to get a Developing Your Creative Practice, or DYCP, grant from Arts Council England. And that's been, it's a real kind of game-changing grant, because it meant I could buy out some of my time from my day job and have time to focus on my writing, and also resource a little bit of mentoring just to help me build relationships that would further my writing career, I suppose, looking at partnerships and collaborations.
And which elements of that developing your creative practice program did you find most helpful for you?
I think it was a big part of it actually was the advocacy, because having an award like that, Arts Council sort of believed I was a writer, and so that really made a difference to me. It was probably the first time where I started calling myself a writer, I suppose, as opposed to just somebody who liked writing, So that really did make a difference to me, and it meant that I could go to other people, other organisations, and sort of suggest we get involved in a project together and show legitimacy and validation by having this grant. So it made a really massive difference to me. And in fact, it was at that point that a lot of those sort of relationships that have now gradually developed into projects and partnerships really began. Yeah.
And you briefly mentioned mentoring as well. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what that consisted of and what value you found in it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that was really finding people to talk to who would encourage me and say, yes, you are a writer. I mean, a lot of it was that. And I think when you're, I've sort of been an emerging writer, even though I'm now nearly 60, I can't believe, next year. So, I think sometimes when you're a bit of a late starter in something and you're kind of needing a bit of a confidence boost, being able to talk to people, share your writing and just get that kind of validation of feedback is really massive. So I was able to, I worked with poet Sasha Dugdale, for example, worked with Jenny Uglow and various other sort of authors, poets, people writing in different forms to just kind of talk through the work. I shared the work with a lot of people before it came anywhere near publishing. Yeah.
And the Developing Your Creative Practice offer is part of the Arts Council England's wider support for artists and organisations, and anyone interested in those grants can go to the Arts Council England website and just click on the funding section for that, and you'll find out information there. I think they run about 4 times a year.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Deadlines open.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about it is that you don't have to commit to finishing a piece of work or publishing something in particular or doing a particular piece of engagement work. It's more open.
That's right, yeah. It's really about supporting the artist at a critical point in their career. And yes, an artist across art forms, so writers, visual artists, dance, whatever. And it's really asking the artist to think about what's the step changing moment for them and what's going to really make a difference. So anyone who's thinking of applying, it's really looking at their practice, I guess, and thinking what's going to really make the massive difference and take me from point A to point, G or something like that. And so it really is a step change.
And what was that particular moment of change for you? What was that kind of sudden realisation that you needed to push on a certain door?
For me, it was very much about confidence, I'd say. So being able to share my work with writers I really admired and get feedback from them and ultimately get encouragement. That's what really made a difference to me, because it gave me the confidence to say, okay, this is a real thing. I'm not just kind of twiddling on the laptop here. This is a real, this is an artifact, I suppose, because I think as writers, we start off writing a book or collection of poetry or whatever, and to start with, we're so deeply and personally invested in it, but there's a point at which it becomes an artifact, it becomes something in its own right, where we have to put it out into the world. And I think that's quite a kind of a maturing moment and a transition, and it really helped me to I guess, have that mentoring from more experienced authors to help me through that.
And so the book is out in the world. You've launched it at the wonderful Wivenhoe bookshop in Essex, and you've got events here and other places, and a sold-out workshop here as well. What's next on your sort of radar? What things are you pondering at the moment?
Well, a lot of my focus, I think, for the next 12 months is going to be devoting my time to the book and talking about it and getting the work out, because the content of the book and the conversations that it will generate, or I hope it will generate, are really important to me. So that's a major focus. But in terms of my my own writing, I'm looking at a number of sort of different, again, life writing, I think, projects. I've got a project I'm working on. 10 years ago, actually, this year, I did this crazy cycle ride from Land's End to Shetland, carrying a guitar, writing a blog, and never quite got the book out because of various personal events during the last decade, sort of got in the way of that. But I'm quite determined to get that out. And also a book that relates to my mother's experience as a writer, and how I, as a writer, kind of relate to that. So, yeah, a few irons in the fire there.
And that's all material that's sort of percolating and just sort of coming to maturity in the background while you focus on 36 hours.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I have a daily writing practice. I write a journal every day. And so I guess that's also a space where I kind of practice and think about those ideas and test them.
Do you reread your journal regularly, or do you very rarely go back?
I rarely go back. Yeah, I've got volumes and volumes of it. I recently reorganised my shelves, having unpacked from moving house, and flicked through a few pages, and it's always quite a strange encounter, I have to say. Not always an entirely good encounter, you know, but it's okay. It is what it is. It's a process, and there are funny. You know, I see things in there and I think, oh, that's interesting. I might read something actually that has a new relevance to me now, but generally speaking, no, I don't reread. It's a place where I splurge. But by doing that, you are kind of, it's like going to the gym. I think of that. It's, you know, I always say to other writers, you know, on workshops and so on, that doing that kind of daily practice, it really is like going to the gym or doing a yoga or whatever your sort of thing is. It's just exercising those writing muscles.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, as a reader, you know, the conversations and the thoughts that have been provoked by 36 hours have been really profound over the last week or so. I feel really privileged to have had access to those 36 hours, as well as the many years it's taken to write and create that book. You know, I really can't recommend it enough, and I just thank you for putting it out into the world and taking that chance. I think it's really appreciated, and it's not often enough that writers are just thanked for actually taking the risk. So thank you from all of us. Thank you for being on this Writing Life podcast. And looking forward to your event this afternoon. Thank you very much, Chris. It's been absolutely brilliant, and really looking forward to this afternoon too. Thank you.
A big thank you to Fiona Mason and Chris for their time. If you have any questions or you want to get in touch, you can find us at Writers Centre on Twitter and Instagram. We're on Facebook, and you can sign up to the NCW newsletter at nationalcentreforwriting.org.uk. As a UK registered charity, we rely on the generosity of our supporters to make our work possible. You can make a donation over on the website by going to the Support Us page. Please do subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and a review, because it helps other people to find us. Thanks again, keep writing. I'll catch you on the next episode.